Welcome to the Hooligan Nation, a KISS-Centric podcast. I'm Anthony.
I'm Rocco.
He is, by the way. He is Rocco. Little Rocky, The Rock. He's all of those things.
Forget about it.
We're back this week with an all-new bonus episode. And boy, I feel my blood pressure rising just thinking about having this discussion on film. I really do. I don't think that I've ever disliked anything that came out of any members, past or present, of KISS more than I dislike this statement, which is part of the reason why we're going to discuss it today, because it still angers me.
It was a good idea. I think a lot of KISS fans will feel the same way.
It's 2 years old, and it's still mind-boggling to me that these guys, both sides, by the way, would do this publicly. But we're going to discuss KISS's appearance on the Howard Stern Show in March of 2023. And we're then going to discuss Ace Frehley's appearance, I believe it's the next day, on Eddie Trunk's show, where he, let's say, voices his displeasure. So I have an article that we're going to read, but before we read the article, for those that are confused like me, KISS appeared on the Howard Stern Show in March of 2023. They played a couple songs in full makeup and costume. They were promoting the last few months of the End of the Road tour. And during this appearance, Howard interviewed them, and he asked the question about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why didn't Ace Frehley and Peter Criss play with them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And Paul had some very unnice things to say about his former bandmates.
Yeah.
So I'll read the article and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
So I got the article from metaledgemag.com. It does not state who wrote it. KISS appeared on SiriusXM's The Howard Stern Show in March of 2023. And when asked by Stern why the band didn't perform at the 2014 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, Paul Stanley responded that he and Gene Simmons have too much pride in the current lineup with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, and that to go on stage with original members Peter Criss and Ace Frehley would not only be demeaning to the band, but it would also cause confusion amongst the fan base. If you saw people on stage who looked like KISS but sounded like that, Stanley said, maybe we should be called PISS for anybody that needs this to be translated to them. He said that if Peter Criss and Ace Frehley were back in the band in 2014, which is when I think they got inducted into the Hall of Fame, that the band would have to be called PISS instead of KISS. Now, I'm not sure about you, Little Rocky, but this is for sure taking this shit show too far. For me, I kind of lost a lot of respect for him that day. You can win gracefully, and him and Gene won in every way humanly possible.
True. My thing is, I'm a big fan of Paul. I always will be. He's definitely never been my favorite. I've said it many times on the show. I give him a lot of credit for being a glue to keep them together all these years. That's a comment I'll never forgive.
I think his point was to disrespect Peter and Ace.
100%.
But I think, at least in my case, I felt like he disrespected the fan base.
Well, what makes me hold on to it is he doesn't regret saying it.
Well, we've talked about that before on this show. That cat don't regret anything he says.
That's why it stays with me too. Like, you don't need to throw shade.
I think he thinks he's justified in saying that. And look, in 2023, I couldn't say that he was completely wrong about Peter, only because Peter was retired and nobody really knew what he was doing, if he was doing anything. In the case of Ace, Ace was out there touring. Ace has been out there touring. He's been out there making albums.
Well, here's another aspect that you may not have thought of. Did Paul at that period in time lose a little off his fastball himself? You know what? You're not on the top of your game. You're not what you used to be. And I love these guys, but you got to call it like it is.
Well, that's the funny part. And that brings us to the second part of this article, which is where Ace responds. Now, Frehley, speaking with Eddie Trunk on Sirius XM's Trunk Nation, has gone public about being pissed off. That's good writing right there. About the piss comment and demanded an apology from his former bandmate. Ace, and I quote, stated, "I'm going to make a statement to Paul Stanley right now. I'm telling you that I want a formal apology for what he said, and a retraction and an apology within 7 days. And if I don't get that within 7 days, I'm coming back on Ed Trunk's show, and I'm going to tell some dirt that nobody knows about Paul and Gene." Frehley didn't stop there. He stated, "My attorney has it in a safety deposit box. God forbid anything happens to me. My attorney is instructed to release it to the New York Times, Rolling Stone, everybody," he continued. "So they can't intimidate me with trying to hurt me or saying you better not say anything about me live on the radio, because then they're totally screwed. Their careers will be ruined. Those guys aren't squeaky clean. You know how many lawsuits girls have had against Gene? Probably a few." There was a lot of talk on Eddie Trunk's show during that week, of course, from fans asking Eddie Trunk if he knew what the dirt was. And I got to give Eddie credit. I know a lot of people don't like Eddie Trunk. I don't personally know him, but I got to give him credit for this one. He really downplayed Ace's statements all week long. And as it turned out, the night before Ace came on his show for the second time, he called Ace up and advised him not to do it, that it wasn't worth it, that it was beneath him. Ace ended up coming on the next day and reiterated what Eddie Trunk said, that he took Eddie's advice and he wasn't going to do it. Good on Ace. I don't believe that Paul ever responded to Ace's original statement or his follow-up statement the week after. I do know that it has been brought up on Eddie Trunk's show a few times, and all Eddie will say is he didn't want to be in the middle of drama and dirt, and he didn't believe that KISS fans wanted to watch or listen to it happen. And I have to agree with him.
What's your opinion on the supposed phone call from Paul? You think it happened?
Yeah, I think it probably happened. And I also think, look, who's ever out there that's listening or watching us and is a Paul Stanley or Gene Simmons fan, which I consider myself fans of both of them.
Me too.
If you think that Paul Stanley or Gene Simmons are squeaky clean and Ace Frehley and Peter Criss are the only two that have skeletons in your closet, I think you're childlike and you don't have the amount of common sense that you need. I'm sure they all have dirt. I think a lot of us know that Gene and Paul both have thrown out dirt about Peter and Ace through the years. And
it's kind of part of their shtick.
I'm sure most of it, if not all of it, is true. Ace makes mention that they're always talking about him being a drug addict and an alcoholic. Well, Ace was a drug addict and an alcoholic. So,
yeah, but it's sensitive because he's beat it. I mean, right? He's kind of beat it.
Well, I mean, so has Peter, and they've made mention that Peter was an alcoholic and a drug addict.
I think he just wants to let it rest, especially if he's got it taken care of himself, you know.
But I don't consider that dirt. I consider that common knowledge.
He's probably tired of hearing it.
Well, I'm sure he is, but I'm sure Paul and Gene are tired of being asked about it.
Yeah, but
I mean,
if I was Ace, I kind of understand him from that point of view. If I was Ace and I conquered a big demon in my life, and it's been years and years and years, and you still got to answer questions for it, because I would get annoyed at it after a while too.
but what I'm saying is, if I was Paul and Gene, I would get annoyed at it also. But then if you don't answer it, you look like you're hiding something.
I've been like, this is the next subject, but we've already talked about that. That's
Yeah.
common knowledge. You know what I mean? Like they could diss it, they could completely dismiss it, but they look at opportunities to throw stones. They always have. That's the same. That's the thing that's a shame about it.
Well, as far as the
Less Gene,
pit,
more Paul.
as far as the piss statement, that's absolutely, that's not even throwing a stone. That's
It's
throwing
out
a
of line.
flaming
Yeah.
boulder to me. But as far as answering the question honestly, it's very well documented that Ace showed up to the studio when he wanted to. And a lot of times he showed up, he wasn't in the best shape possible. That's been said by people other than Paul and Gene.
Well,
And
that's
I mean, the most historical, to me, the most historical thing in regards to Peter is the guy who produced his solo album, the guy who Peter went to the rest of the band and said, if he doesn't produce Dynasty, I'm not going to play on it. That same guy determined that Peter wasn't fit to play the drums on Dynasty, and that's why he doesn't play. So I don't think it's dirt or drama or throwing stones or boulders.
well, like I said about what Paul said. Like number one, you can't take that comment back. Supposedly there was a phone call, like we said, and Ace said that he still refused to apologize. Called him like a couple days later. Who knows? But honor this band. At the end of the day, keep your freaking money and all that stuff out of it. Honor this band, because everybody who's been a part of it has made an incredible. It's part of an incredible legacy. And doing that kind of stuff, you're lessening yourself. You're lessening your own achievements with the band when you do that. To me,
I think you're right. And I think probably what's most important to Paul and Gene, unfortunately, in my opinion, is you're lessening the brand.
hmm.
But I think we're discussing two different things. I don't think there's any justification for the piss statement.
Agreed.
As far as answering the questions honestly that people ask, I think that's part of the business. And I think when you're Paul or Gene, or for that matter, Ace or Peter, after 50 years of mostly having to answer these questions, I think you stop trying to find the panned
Yeah, but like
set up answer
I know what you're
and you
saying, but
tell the truth. Just cut it right before you say we would have to call the band Piss.
but I mean,
And the first reason is because I don't believe that it's factual, because I believe that Ace, to this day, in June of 2025, Ace can still play. Although Ace is not a great lead singer, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you he is, but he's also not using backing tracks, and it's been more than proven that Paul's been using backing tracks.
because he's lesser than, and you're gonna be not able to sing the way you used to, and you're calling them piss. Like
Right.
that's when I first heard, I was like, who are you to be doing that? You're not the top of your game anymore. Have a
Right.
little decency and just let's move past it. Like if I was Paul or Gene, I mean, how many times they get interviewed? They get interviewed like every other
Oh
day
my
now.
God. I know we can't keep up with
Right.
all the interview appearances Paul and Gene do.
But if you're Gene and Paul, I'm leaving that question behind. I'm not asking that question. That question's been answered in nauseum many times. Let's move on from the drug shit. What's Ace been up to lately? Like, or do you guys still communicate in any way? Those are kind of things I want. I don't want to hear about their drug shit. That's old. That's old news. We knew about that. That's why when Paul to say that when your house isn't completely in order either, I thought it was completely out of line. It's my little rant for today.
Oh, you get a rant. I like that. Look, part of this, I guess I say this too much when it comes to this band, but this is really fascinating to me. It was such an easy answer for me without the piss. Like the question was asked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And the first part of the answer from Paul, I agree with. And I understand because I know me as a fan. If the four of them would have walked out there for the induction ceremony in makeup and even without makeup on, but if the four of them would have walked out there together for that induction ceremony and played two or three songs, the Kiss Army would have went buck wild. They're reuniting again, and then it does confuse fans. I can understand. It sounds crazy to me because it would never confuse me, but if I had $1 for every YouTube video that talks about Peter Criss or Ace Frehley and then puts a picture of Eric Singer or Tommy Thayer on the thumbnail, I'd have a lot of dollars. Like this does confuse people, and all the fans that they picked up post 2004, and I'm sure there's a lot of them. I mean, the younger fans either came from good parenting or they came from Sonic Boom and Monster and that era. You could very well confuse them because if you're not a diehard Kiss fan and you're a just a passive Kiss fan, do you dig into all the history? I bet you there's Kiss fans out there that have no clue that Tommy Thayer or Eric Singer are wearing Peter Criss and Ace Frehley's makeup. You will confuse those kinds of people, and you also open yourself up to having to answer questions about another reunion constantly. I can understand why that statement would be made, and I agree with it. Look, I wish, just like I think every Kiss fan wishes, they should have got up there with everyone, including Vinnie Vincent. Yes, I said it. And they should have done it because, number one, I'm on record as saying it would have been the right thing to do. Number two, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame dictated who got in and who didn't. There was nothing Kiss could do about it other than not show up, allegedly. Now, my opinion on this show has been in the past that I think that Peter Criss, Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley, and Gene Simmons should have got together. Probably not a real believable thing at the time, but they should have got together and they should have went back to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and said, you induct everybody, or you induct this person, this person, this person, and this person, or don't induct us. We're not showing up. We could care less. Because honestly, what did being called Rock and Roll Hall of Famers do for Kiss? I don't think it did anything for them. It didn't kick up record sales. I don't think they care about that at all. I don't even think it helps Ace Frehley or Peter Criss out. If you're a Kiss fan, you know that they were eligible for like 30 years. They got screwed. The critics hate them. Everybody hates them. The establishment of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame were never Kiss fans. Everybody knows that this was driven by Tom Morello, and they gave Kiss the least that they could have given them. So in my fantasy world, all the living members of Kiss get up there and they play three songs. Let's say one from the makeup era, one from the non-makeup era, and then Rock and Roll All Night. We're good. Three songs. Everybody gets their moment in the spotlight. Everybody gets recognized. And I think for the most part, KISS fans have to be happy about that. But it would have driven all four of them guys crazy, because no one would have wanted to talk about anything other than when's the next reunion.
Mhm.
And as far as full-fledged reunions go, that ship had already sailed. And I can't blame Paul, Gene, Peter, or Ace for that ship sailing. If they would have reunited again post 2014, it would have clearly been a money grab thing. Clearly. And that would have been the only reason for it. I don't think we would have gotten any new music out of it. And honestly, I don't think it would have lasted. I don't even think it would have lasted a tour. There's too much water. It's not under that bridge. It's enveloped the bridge. There's too much. But there's a line.
That's who they are. It's their history. It's pretty much.
But there's a line. If Gene and Paul have been sued by women, or if Gene have been sued by women, I don't think that needs to be made public by a member of the band or a past member of the band. At the end of the day, after it's settled in, I would probably put Ace somewhere in the category with Paul for doing it. But it would have been entertaining at the moment for somebody to throw dirt at Paul and Gene. And look, Ace did throw a little bit of dirt. He said on Eddie Trunk's show that, well, at least I'm not using backing tracks, which is probably the harshest thing that he could have said about Paul that wasn't dirt. It's fact. It's fact. It's fact that, they had addressed it. Doc McGee addressed it. Gene addressed it, and they had a very good politically correct answer for it. The bottom line is, part of the reason why KISS retired was because Paul can't sing anymore. I mean, I went to see 2 shows on the End of the Road tour. Even with the backing tracks playing, he still sounded terrible. He can't even talk. He's got like a Mickey Mouse voice when he talks. It's not a Mickey Mouse voice. Mickey Mouse has a smoother voice. That's not throwing dirt on Paul. That's the unfortunate part of getting old.
But let's throw something
and being
positive.
The kind of singer that he was.
Well, let's throw something positive. You always hear about Robert Plant. You hear about Steve Perry. You hear about all these other guys. I mean, Paul can hang with any of them, in my opinion. Paul had a voice that went at his peak when he was in his prime.
Oh.
When he was in his prime, was there a high note he couldn't hit? He couldn't.
No,
Robert Plant
no.
That's
no. But
is,
we're
he's
not
never
talking.
But I'm saying, yes, he's a shell of what he once was, and it actually works against him talking shit about Ace and them. But at the same time, when Paul was at his best, I don't think he ever got the credit for the vocalist that he is.
He didn't, and I think that's the double-edged sword of being a band like KISS. People listened with their eyes. It was more about the gimmick than it was about the talent.
But his range was limitless. Like his range, you can't, he could hang with anybody.
Absolutely, but that range
did him in.
Probably what killed his voice.
Yeah, and a bunch of other people like Bon Jovi too.
Sure.
You can't keep that up going.
Sure, John Bon Jovi, David Coverdale, and it's unfortunate, but don't throw rocks when you live in a glass house. Correct. Is basically the premise for this entire segment.
Bro, I've said it over and over again. I love these guys. I take them for good and I take them for bad, all the ins and outs of all of it. Primarily, this episode is about Paul saying an unforgivable comment that you can't take back. That, right?
I personally, I have no issue with Paul bringing up Ace and Peter's past drug habits, past alcohol issues, their antics, their lack of alleged responsibility and accountability. All that stuff, I don't really have an issue with. But when you stoop to the level, and for what I believe is something that's uncalled for, I think you get whatever you deserve for it. And not that I ever thought that Paul Stanley was going to come out and say, hey, I shouldn't have said it. I apologize. But he should have.
I think
I
from the moment
absolutely knew at the time that he wasn't going to, but he still should have.
I think it's a bad. It's like an area that's a bad part of his personality because from the moment it left his lips, he didn't regret saying it, and he to this day he probably still doesn't regret saying it. But there's some things that are completely unnecessary. You got to also realize what you're projecting out to your fans too. You know that
Right.
insult. That was I took it as an insult as a fan.
Absolutely. That's what I said in the beginning of this. I think the insult was aimed at Peter and Ace. I think what Paul, and to a lesser degree Gene, didn't realize is that the KISS fans were going to have an issue with it. And I don't think they planned on that. Now, I got to be honest, as bad as it looks for Paul, I think it looked worse for Gene because Gene just sat there like a dope.
I can imagine that Paul and him had an interesting conversation after the show was over.
See, now, me being who I am, unfortunately, that would be a conversation we would have live on the air at the Howard Stern show. Like, hey, hold up. You might have just went too far.
Yeah, Gene, what do you think about that? Yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't. If I was Gene, nobody would have even had to ask me. I would have said, "Whoa,
Whoa, Paul, you went too far there, bub.
yeah, you went too far." They're live, so there was no taking it back.
I'm a Gene guy. I've said it many times, but Paul is the alpha amongst the two of them. And Gene's never been one to be worried about something that was said and running away from it. But yeah, he distanced himself completely from that.
And before we wrap this up, I would be incredibly remiss not to say that I got to give Peter Criss the most credit of everybody because, as far as I know, no response to this day. No response. It's beneath him. He just didn't need to respond to it, and I believe he didn't need to respond to it. Ace said what he said, responded to it. Peter just kept quiet and has never addressed it. And just the way it comes across to me is he's not going to stoop to the low level that Paul stooped to.
Yeah, I can hear him say, "Oh, that's Paul." I could see him not even like, "Well, that's who Paul is." You know what I mean? I could see him kind of brushing it off like that.
It's really
And Ace is a
unfortunate.
fighter. Ace wants to fight back. You know, you're talking shit. I'll give it right back to you, pal.
But it's really unfortunate if that's really Paul. It is kind of unfortunate.
I mean,
that goes back to never meet your heroes.
right. It's unfortunate because certain comments, like you can kind of see, like from even a comment like that would make me be like, listen, I'll always be available to do something with them, but they're going to pay. I think that could be things like that could be why they can't just get past certain things and it has to be business because when you make comments like that, you're done.
Oh, I absolutely believe that, but I think whether they got along or not, whether the piss statement came out or not, Ace wanted $250,000 a night to get up there at the two final shows, and his words, go out there for 3 or 4 songs. Look, I don't know what Paul and Gene took away from the last 2 shows. I'm sure it's over $250,000 a piece in their pocket. But, we've killed this lately. Well, I've killed this lately. Paul and Gene and Ace and Peter are not equal. For all the KISS fans out there that keep thinking they're equal, they're not equal. 2 members quit multiple times or did things to get themselves fired. And then they sold their rights. So they're not equal. So, paying Ace Frehley $250,000 to come up and play 3 or 4 songs, I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't. Number one, it's unfortunate, but they didn't need them. They sold out the Garden 2 nights in a row. It's a very intricate, layered conversation. To me, it is.
Yeah.
It's not a black and white, cut and dry situation. All four of these guys have been wrong or continue to be wrong
But I mean,
multiple times over the years.
and all that drama is still, it's like part of their mystique. It just makes you always constantly have questions about different ins and outs of this band, the original four. It adds to the mystique of the band. Like it just lets you know what it adds to the mystique of the interactions and the relationships between these four from the start. But at the end of the day, it was Gene and Paul's machine.
At least the business end of it, they were always the business end of
And
it.
and I think Peter and Ace cared more and more about the business. The older they got, the more they got rid of their demons. At the time when they started out, hey, it's a big party. I don't care.
Right. And I think, to say that that's a Ace Frehley or Peter Criss thing is short-sighted also. That's a whole lot of rock stars
Oh
and
yeah, 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 yeah.
bands.
No, but I'm saying when feelings are hurt, it becomes about business.
A lot of times I think it becomes about business, and that's why the feelings get hurt. If you're listening to us on any of the podcast platforms, please leave us a review. And if you just found us, check out our past episodes. If you are watching us on our YouTube channel and you like this episode, please consider hitting the like button, just like him, and leaving us a comment. Hit that subscribe button, just like him, so you don't miss any future episodes, and check out these episodes right up here. As always, if you made it this far, thank you for supporting us, and don't forget, if it's too loud, you're too old. Peace out, Hooligan Nation.